Hello, I'm
Hello.
here today with the great mezzo soprano Lisa Chavez. Lisa, wonderful to see you.
Nice to see you.
We have you coming to the Mid Atlantic Symphony a couple of times in the next few months. First of all, you're coming this summer on August 15th at the Freeman Stage in a collaboration with the New York City Opera, so with a few other singers from New York City Opera, in an outdoor concert that will be our first performance since the month of March. So let's
Yes,
keep our
mine
fingers
as well.
crossed, and we look forward to seeing you there. And then you'll be our featured guest for our New Year's Eve concert, obviously on December 31st, in a variety of repertoire of your choosing. And it will be very exciting for our Eastern audience to discover one of the great American mezzos of today. Um, Lisa, when people hear you sing, they often say, "Well, there's no one else like Lisa Chavez. She just takes the house. She
Oh,
takes down the house." And I've been wondering, what was it like when you realized you wanted to become a singer as a young person? How did it come about?
well, I always just loved singing. My I found out later that a lot of family members kind of dabbled in singing, and my mother's mother, my grandmother, she actually sang a bit with like a touring kind of church group a little bit when she was younger. She was a soprano, and so I was really lucky that my family all pretty much were positive about my singing. They wanted me to do something else, of course, like my other grandmother wanted me to be a lawyer or something, but nobody was very negative about my singing, so that was fantastic. I had a bit of support from my family, but since I was a kid, I sang with my mom in the car on the radio. We would sing at the top of our lungs, and just have it was such a positive thing for me. I really loved it. And I was really lucky in elementary and high school, junior high, all of my schooling, that I had really great teachers, and we had good music programs, even though we had a very low budget for it where I grew up. So I had a lot of experience singing, but I didn't really have any training singing. And so I didn't actually start with voice lessons until college. I went to a state school and got into the music department with a scholarship, and then had my first voice lessons, and my teacher was like, okay, we have some stuff to work on. So I had really focused a lot on musical theater and a bit of jazz when I was younger. So I had a very heavy chest voice. I still do, actually, but we my teacher at one of our first lessons, he goes, I think you're gonna do Carmen. And he's like, you have a good look for it, and your voice, once we get it together, it'll be a good fit for you. So he made me promise not to audition for anything, because I had a lot of stage experience. So especially when you're younger in college, that stage experience kind of outweighs sometimes the technical ability, just in the fact that you can sell something for them. But he made me promise not to audition for anything for at least a year, so that we could focus on technique, and then go from there. And that's when I really started falling in love with opera, with classical music. I had a great music history teacher who made us do a lot of research and program notes for our concerts and things. So that was kind of when I really focused on music being my future.
Fantastic. And that's about when you discovered really what voice you were, what was your fashion, what kind of rap you wanted to do.
Yeah, well, not really so much what rep I wanted to do. It was kind of like I really trusted my teacher at that time to give me things that were appropriate, or things that I could grow into, things that I could learn, focus on language and things like that. So, in undergraduate, you focus a lot on art songs and things like that. And we did have some really fantastic art our pianist collaborator there at my undergraduate, he was so talented. Richard Mercier was his name, and he had taught in New York. He had worked in New York, and he actually was my contact to getting into Manhattan School of Music. And he was infatuated with Ellie Ameling. He would do a series and he would every year listen to every one of her records. He would go through chronologically and listen to every Ellie Ameling. And so he was very knowledgeable in art song and gave us some real cool, beautiful little gems that I never would have thought of. And he arranged some master classes that we would not have had exposure to with some really great singers. So that was just a little glimpse into what possibilities there could be.
Fantastic. You know, you and I did our first collaboration was Carmen, and that's a role that you've done a lot. And it was just so marvelous to do this with you. Tell me a bit about your relationship with that character and with that role.
I love Carmen. You know, there's a lot of problems with Carmen when you're talking about issues of today and chauvinism and things like that. But she kind of was this, especially at the time, a very strong female character that wasn't like still waiting for the guy to sweep her off of her feet. She was the one who kind of took charge. So I love the difference that you have in Carmen, because you have, you know, the habanera, everybody knows the habanera, the seguirillas, a little bit more, you know, those are very flirty songs, but then you have the card aria, which is really the time that you see her being really introspective and knowing that the end is near, and almost a bit of fear in her that you never see any other time. You get to play the castanets, which is always really fun. The dancing, all of it is just the fighting. You get a whole array of theater in one show, which I really enjoy. I really like Carmen as well because the chorus is so involved in it, and so you get to, in certain operas, you don't necessarily get to work or hang out or socialize with the chorus as much, and I really enjoy that about Carmen too, because it's just such the chorus is its own character. I mean, they are in so much of this opera that it's very important for me to have moments throughout the opera, which was unfortunate about our collaboration, only in the fact that they were very, you know, more like a Greek chorus where they were sitting in the back, so there was a little bit room wise and whatnot, but it's just really fun. You get to usually meander through the crowd, have little moments with everybody, and that's an added bonus for me in that piece itself.
Fantastic. And you and I also did a semi-staged Aida, and that
Yes.
was the first Amneris, and
yes.
certainly didn't sound like it was your first. How did you relate to that complex Amneris?
I like her too. She's definitely not somebody that you sympathize with. And Carmen is kind of that way too, in the fact that, I mean, some people really feel bad at the end that she died, or that, you know, Jose kind of went crazy and killed her. But a lot of people also are like, well, she kind of deserved it, you know, and which nobody deserves that. But at the same time, for Amneris, it's a little bit different. I mean, I think she just grows up as this privileged, spoiled girl, and she doesn't know. I kind of equate her to how I felt in my early teens, in that way that your hormones are kind of going crazy and you just say stuff because you're so angry and you don't think about it first, and it's just like the first thing that comes out of your mouth is usually something kind of manipulative or nasty or pointed and mean, and then later you go back to your room after you've had your fit and you go, why did I say that? That was so terrible. Like, and you have this like moment of, I can't believe I did that. And that's kind of how Amneris, I feel, especially in the last scene, you know, she comes to this, she's like, why did I do this? But she has already said it. It's already happened. And the stuff has hit the fan. I won't curse on your.
Yeah, of course. And that's when we start to sympathize with her at that point.
I think so. It's a sympathy only in the fact that you see that she's somewhat remorseful. I don't think, you know, there's no sympathy for her. Your sympathy is all on Aida and Radames, but
Sure, of course.
you know, you do see that she does have there is still that bit of humanity in her, and possibly should change her way in the future, you know, to be a good leader, possibly, you know.
So I feel, I have to say, I feel a little more maybe sympathetic than you do towards her. Starting at the judgment scene, I start to feel, okay, you know, she's actually a human being.
Yeah, and I think part of it, she's upset with the system that she's stuck into as well. You know, when she's talking to all of the priests and telling them like how can they make these decisions and things like that, you know. But it's also because it comes from a spoiled place. She's royalty. She should be able to make those decisions and tell them what to do, you know. So it is mixed as well. You know,
absolutely.
she's a spoiled girl, and I don't think she never emotionally grew up. And you know, in reality, how old might she be? She probably is still very young, even though she's usually played by an older person just because of the vocal requirement. But you know, you hope that this was a lifelong lesson for her, because people don't change their nature unless something happens to them to make them change it. So I think this is one of those moments.
Unless it's enough trouble. So what are the roles you're looking forward to in the future?
I'm hoping to sing many Amnerises. I'm hoping that's the first of many, many, many. And I'm really looking forward to moving into the Verdi rep. I'd love to sing in Azucena, which she's also another character that has many levels to her as well, and then things that you cannot be sympathetic to her as well. I think it's the plight of a mezzo. You know, you get to be kind of the bad guy, and usually there's at least something redeemable, and you can play into that and make them a real person. I don't think anybody is completely evil or completely good, and you know, so there has to be a dimension out, like a two dimensions to multi dimensions to a character. I'd love to do a Dalila. I'd love to do that, but that's not done very often. I would also, on my bucket list is Charlotte in Werther. I love that opera. I think it's so beautiful. Another opera that's not done too often just because of the scale of it. And you've got to have a real killer children's group to do those kids. But there's a lot of stuff on the horizon. I'm hoping, you know, things keep evolving and that we get to go back on stage very soon.
Oh yes, let's hope. Let's sure hope. Now you work with quite a few companies in the U.S., especially New York City Opera and Sarasota Opera. Tell me a little bit about the scene here and how it's evolving, and how is every work ambiance a little bit different in every company? How the tone is set?
So every company obviously is so different, and a lot of that comes from their necessities, the area in which they are. So I would say I really started kind of what really got my career going in a positive way was I was accepted to be a principal resident artist at Opera San Jose, which was the company founder was Irene Dallas, who was a very, very famous mezzo-soprano. She started her career in Europe and then also sang at the Met, San Francisco. She sang all over the country. And she hired me to be a mezzo principal resident there in San Jose. And she basically set the company to be more of a European model as opposed to an American model, where you would have your principal resident, you would have more like a fest idea, but we don't have that here in the States. So it wasn't a young artist program where you're singing secondary roles, maybe some chorus within everything. All of the principal artists were in residency for at least the year. Often people stayed for multiple years, and you would sing for me, I would sing the mezzo soprano lead in each show that they had. And if there was something completely not fitting, then they would hire a guest to fill in that particular show. They had a 4 opera season with 6 performances of each opera. So you really get to feel get to perform a role and really feel comfortable in it. A lot of companies around the country, you get to do it once, maybe you get to do it twice. And so I feel that doesn't make you feel really settled in a role, especially if it's a new role. So it was a fantastic experience in that we had long rehearsal processes. So you really get to feel the opera, the people that you're working with, and having it be a year-long residency, you know, your tenor, soprano, and baritone, you were in multiple shows together. So you had a real sense of camaraderie and how far you could play with people on stage and things like that. So that was a fantastic experience. And I had a number of real lead roles that I was able to perform there. And some premieres as well, which was very nice and exciting. Premieres are great because you get to start, you don't have anybody to compare it to. It's just your performance, which is very nice. Then, you know, since moving from there, a couple other companies that have very different models, but also very great. We have New York City Opera that I have worked with now, I think 4 or 5 shows with them. So, and a variety of things. We just did a year ago, did a premiere of Stonewall, the opera, for the 50th anniversary of the uprising. So that was an amazing collaboration, and also another first time that the role comes out. So it was an amazing creative team, amazing. And their situation is great because they are multifaceted and they do many different venues of performance. So they have their main stage stuff that they do at Jazz at Lincoln Center, which is the big auditorium there actually in Columbus Circle. And then they also do things, concerts in the park, in Bryant Park. They do smaller concerts that are a little bit more intimate in some theater scapes instead, so that you get a very raw, intimate performance of certain of their chamber operas and things like that. So that's nice because there's different types of performances that you can do. And then you go to Sarasota, which is very much traditional opera. Their Maestro Julien is very focused on having the opera performed the way that the composer and the librettist envisioned it. So you really go back to the beginning. To start rehearsals, for the first day or 2, we just go through the libretto and we read every line, we translate it, and you better not come with a janky, translation from the internet, no CD liner notes or anything like that. You have to, it's very much word for word. He'll ask you certain questions, maybe about tenses and things like that. So you do have to spend some time, and it makes a big difference. It does make a big difference knowing what they're saying and who's saying what. And translations are sometimes really poetic and they're not true to what the words mean. And if you're just kind of phoning it in, it's sometimes pretty obvious. Or if you've translated a word wrong and you're talking about a cat versus a cup, I don't know, it makes a big difference. So.
Oh yes. I have some translation story to tell you.
I bet.
How do you deal with not finding the translation for something, not finding any
Well,
translation?
luckily I have so many friends that speak multiple languages or are very, and natively speak those languages, not like they just learned it, through Duolingo or something like that, which, I mean, rock on for everybody who's learning multiple languages. But I generally try to do all of the work myself, and Google Translate is fantastic because I can kind of put things in, and then I can tell, just from doing your own working and doing a lot of translations, you can see that that he is not he, or they've translated the tense wrong or something like that, or the possessive or something. You can see that wasn't quite right. And then so when you have questions about things, I can go and speak to some of my friends, ask their opinion. Oftentimes there are like tenses that aren't used anymore just because of age and whatnot. And then there's also phrases that are common but not translatable very well. So you have to, idioms and things like that. So it's those kinds of things. I'll go and speak to friends after I've kind of translated, and then maybe go through it with them and ask them if what I have figured out is right. And oftentimes there's, at least 3 or 4 really glaring errors. So it's important work to do, though. It's very important.
Great. So Lisa, when you prepare your character, of course, there's all this work on the text, and you seem to really go into the psychology of the character and intricately understand it. But how do you go about, sort of building the vocal, you know, range and the palette of sounds for that specific character? How much do you relate it to the text? And
Well, it all kind of, I feel, has to come from the text, because you have to know, and a lot of that is also the poetry of it, because you have to know how the poetry is written. So like, and it's different in every language. So, French, almost always you go to the end of the sentence and the stress is on the penultimate syllable. So, it's not like in English how I will stress a word every time I wanted to say something that's important to me, and da, 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 da. So you have, multiple stresses within the sentence. Often in French, it will kind of go, 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 and then it's over. So the finding the stress within the poetry, which great composers do this very well, they make the long note on the most important part of the sentence. And so, and obviously within a sentence, there are a few words that are very important, but they're not the ultimate stress of the music. So, and then the character themselves, I mean, Carmen is, this will be the wrong way to explain it, but she is more of a dirty character. So her French is a little dirty. And so it's, she doesn't say donc, she says donc, she's like, there's all these, there's things that you can go into a little bit harsher and a little bit heavier mechanism and things like that than you would necessarily on somebody who is more like Charlotte, who is a, very, proper and more of a mother figure to all of these people. So she carries herself very differently. And so the way that you would sing it is different as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
no, it does. It's really great. So I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic for our audiences, both at the Freeman Stage this August, so just a little over a month, and at in Easton in December to discover Lisa Chavez. You'll have to see for yourself. I mean, it's really like everybody that hears you sing again says like there's no one else like her. So we'll look very much forward to having you as our guest both times. And thank you so much for chatting today about all your singing and your approach and your accomplishments.
It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the concert. I'm looking forward to getting back to singing. I'm looking forward to getting back to singing with other people. I mean, you know, there's been some at-home video type singing, but it's just not the same thing, you know. So
Yeah, it's not the same. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a
look
great day.
forward to it.
Bye.
Bye.